We need to have a very serious, very direct, and completely honest conversation about what the WNBA has produced in the span of a single 24-hour period. Because the sequence of events that unfolded is one of the most revealing and most consequential windows into this league's institutional relationship with its most commercially significant player that this entire season has generated. And it deserves to be examined with the full analytical weight every element of it carries, not selectively and not through any single explanatory lens that flattens the complexity of what actually happened. Let us begin with the play itself, because it is the foundation upon which everything else rests. Indiana Fever versus Phoenix Mercury, a nationally broadcast game. The atmosphere was already elevated. These two teams had been building a physical, contentious competitive history across their recent meetings. And everyone watching understood the temperature of the environment before the opening tip. When Alyssa Thomas and Caitlin Clark became entangled on the floor, the initial broadcast moment was chaotic in the way that live professional basketball moments often are. Bodies moving, position being fought for, officials allowing the competitive action to continue. But when the replay appeared on screens, what viewers saw was specific. Alyssa Thomas's fist made contact with the throat area of Caitlin Clark. No whistle was blown, no foul was called, the game continued. And what followed was one of the most significant immediate reactions in the documented history of the league's social media environment. Clips circulating from every available angle, frame-by-frame analysis being conducted across platforms in real time. Commentators debating whether the contact was intentional, reckless, or part of the normal physical chaos of a contested basketball play. Now, let us talk about the WNBA's 30th anniversary commemorative poster, because the timing of its release is what transformed an already significant news cycle into something genuinely extraordinary in its layered irony. Hours after the league suspended a player for reckless contact with Clark's throat. Hours after Clark left a game injured. Hours after her coach publicly criticized officiating and argued Clark was being officiated differently. The WNBA released its official 30th anniversary poster, celebrating 3 decades of league history. Caitlin Clark was not on it.
You cannot put out a promotional poster celebrating the 30 years of the WNBA and not put the woman who is singularly most responsible for the popularity and the newfound money and the newfound way of travel and hotels and all the stuff that happened post Caitlin Clark, coming in like a house on fire. And I see this dumb poster and there's no Caitlin Clark on it.
Think about what that specific timing produced. The league had just acknowledged through the formal mechanism of a suspension that a player had directed reckless physical contact at Clark. The league's most publicly visible coaching voice had just argued on camera that Clark was being treated differently by officials. Clark had just exited a game with a physical issue connected to what happened in that game. And the league's major promotional campaign celebrating its anniversary arrived without the player who has been the primary driver of the commercial growth that has made the league's present moment historically significant. The reaction was immediate and it was enormous. Social media engagement with the poster story became one of the most significant audience events of the season. Hashtags trended, comment sections produced the kind of volume that reflects not just fan passion, but genuine mainstream sports audience attention.
The WNBA, they just keep driving into a wall at full speed with Caitlin Clark. They now have a commemorative poster of 30 years of the WNBA. Caitlin Clark's not on it. And it's not just like an ode to the veterans that started the league. Paige Beckers and Angel Reese are on it. And Caitlin Clark's not. When she broke into the league, you moved her road games to bigger arenas to accommodate the fans, and she's not on the 30-year poster. I mean, recently there were TV games. Hers got double the rating of Asia Wilson, the best player in the league, the 3-time champ and the 4-time MVP. Double the rating. This is a paranoid, weird, insular league.
People who cover sports, who consume sports, and who discuss sports as part of their daily lives were all pointing at the same thing simultaneously. And the specific observation that kept appearing from analysts, from commentators, from ordinary fans with no institutional affiliation was straightforward. Clark has transformed this league's commercial visibility in ways that the data confirms unambiguously. Television ratings have increased dramatically since her arrival. Arenas have sold out at rates the league had not previously seen. Merchandise demand has generated numbers that the WNBA had never produced before. Teams have relocated games to larger venues to accommodate the audience demand her presence creates. The commercial trajectory of this league in the present moment is inseparable from Caitlin Clark's arrival and what her presence has generated. One thing that observers on all sides of the debate agreed on, the officials had not called it. Whatever the contact was, it went unaddressed by the people on the floor responsible for maintaining competitive integrity and player safety in that moment. Then the WNBA reviewed the play, and the league made a consequential decision. The league formally classified the contact as a flagrant 2 foul and suspended Alyssa Thomas for 1 game. The official statement described the contact as reckless, specifically characterizing it as Thomas's fist making contact with Clark's throat area during the second quarter of the game. The WNBA used its post-game review authority, which allows the league to reclassify fouls, impose flagrant designations on contact not called during live action, and issue fines or suspensions to impose a consequence that the on-court officiating had not produced. This is the institutional response that the situation demanded. The suspension is real. The flagrant 2 designation is formal. The league acted using the authority available to it, and the action addresses what happened in a documented and public way. And yet the conversation does not end there. It cannot end there. Because the question that the suspension immediately generates among fans who watched the contact and processed what it means is whether 1 game is the appropriate, proportionate response to reckless contact directed at the most commercially significant and individually consequential player in the history of women's professional basketball. That question is legitimate. The deterrent effect of the penalty is real only if the consequence is substantial enough to change the competitive calculus for players and teams considering similar physical approaches in future games. Whether 1 game achieves that deterrent effect is something that the analytical community and the fan community are entitled to debate and to push the league on. Clark left the game with back issues. She did not return. The circumstances surrounding her departure generated its own sustained conversation. Questions about whether the back situation was entirely injury-related or whether coaching decisions contributed to the sequence of events that produced her exit. That conversation is part of the documented record of this situation, with testimonial evidence from people who were physically present at the game, indicating that Clark's back was genuinely affecting her. The complete truth of what happened is probably more complex than any single explanatory narrative captures. And the honest, analytical engagement with that reality requires holding multiple things simultaneously. A genuine physical issue, coaching decisions that belong in their own accountability conversation, and the physical environment that Thomas's conduct helped create. Head coach Stephanie White went to the podium following the loss, and what she said there represents its own analytically significant development that deserves direct examination. White described the officiating failure as egregious. She called it utterly disrespectful. She argued that the league's biggest stars deserve better protection from officials responsible for maintaining player safety during live play. And she said something that spread across every sports platform almost immediately, that she believed Clark was being officiated differently than other players. That statement. Let it sit for a moment before the analysis continues. Because that is Stephanie White, who has spent this entire season generating documented patterns of not centering Clark's contributions in post-game communications, not challenging questionable foul calls on Clark's behalf throughout the season, and requiring organizational infrastructure workarounds to ensure Clark's name appeared in locker room acknowledgments after historic individual performances. That is Stephanie White going to the podium and saying publicly that Clark is being officiated differently. The analytical community tracking this season cannot process that statement without acknowledging its context. White is saying something that is analytically accurate and something that observers outside the organization have been documenting across this entire season. The claim that Clark receives less officiating protection than comparable players in comparable situations has been substantiated by documented game sequences repeatedly throughout this year. White saying it at the podium is the most prominent and most institutional validation of that claim that has yet appeared. But here is the dimension that intellectual honesty requires acknowledging directly. White saying at the podium that Clark deserves better officiating protection is accurate, and it exists in the same organizational universe as White repeatedly failing to use the challenge mechanism to protect Clark from questionable foul accumulation throughout this season. It exists alongside White benching Clark at the end of multiple first-half periods when Clark was producing at an elite level. It exists alongside the documented pattern of post-game communications that did not center Clark's contributions until situations arose where Clark's name was useful for the coaching staff's own narrative management purposes. That is the complete picture. White's podium statement is analytically accurate. Its credibility as a genuine expression of institutional care for Clark's competitive welfare is complicated by the documented record of how that care has expressed itself or has not expressed itself throughout this season's coaching decisions. Whether people love her or are skeptical of the attention she receives, they watch when she plays. That is the commercial fact that the data confirms across every relevant metric. And the 30th anniversary poster, which was supposed to celebrate the league's history, ended up generating a conversation almost entirely about the player who was not on it. That specific result, the absence creating more discussion than the presence of whoever was included, is itself the most powerful statement about Clark's actual impact on the league's visibility that any promotional campaign could have produced, accidentally or otherwise. There is an important distinction that honest analysis requires making. The league never suggested these events were connected. The suspension and the poster were separate institutional actions produced by separate institutional processes. The analytical community should not treat them as deliberately coordinated elements of any single organizational strategy without evidence that they were. What can be examined honestly is the timing as it appeared to observers and what that timing communicated about the league's institutional awareness of its own most visible story. Because here is what the timing produced, regardless of its origin. In a 24-hour window, the WNBA suspended a player for reckless physical contact with Clark. Its head coaching voice argued Clark was being officiated differently. Clark exited a game with a physical issue connected to what happened, and the league's 30th anniversary promotion arrived without Clark on it. The sequence of those events as it appeared in real time is what generated the reaction it generated. Whether the league intended that sequence or not, it produced a moment that the sports world interpreted as revealing something important about how the institution relates to the player who is generating its most commercially significant era. Alyssa Thomas is a 6-time All-Star. She is one of the most respected veterans in this league. She is averaging nearly 15 points, over 8 assists, and more than 6 rebounds per game in the current season. The suspension of a player of her competitive stature represents a meaningful institutional action, not a routine administrative process. The WNBA does not issue flagrant 2 classifications and suspensions to players of Thomas's standing without being prepared to defend that decision as reflecting a serious assessment of the contact involved. The 1-game length will continue to be debated, but the action was taken. The formal record now shows that the league reviewed the contact, classified it as reckless, and imposed a competitive consequence. That is documented and real. What is also documented and real is that the absence of Clark from the 30th anniversary poster became the headline of the day on which the poster was supposed to be the headline. In a league populated with champions, Hall of Famers, and decades of competitive excellence, the player who was not there dominated the conversation about the league's past, present, and future simultaneously. That is not an accusation. That is a description of what happened. And it tells you, with more precision than any statistical summary could, exactly how much the basketball world now orients itself around Caitlin Clark. The suspension addresses what Thomas did. The poster controversy addresses what the league communicated institutionally in a moment that required maximum awareness of its own most visible story. The coaching staff's podium statement addresses the officiating environment that has been documented across this season. And Clark's back injury addresses the physical toll of competing in environments where the contact she absorbs carries real and documented physical consequences. All of it happened in 24 hours. All of it is real. All of it is part of the complete and honest accounting of what this WNBA season has become. And the central figure in every single element of it was Caitlin Clark. Whether she was the subject of a suspension, the inspiration for a podium speech, the injured player leaving a game, or the name conspicuously absent from a poster that was supposed to celebrate 30 years of everything this league has built. The spotlight on Caitlin Clark has never been brighter, whether she was included or not.